Dr. McCraty, I'm so sorry because of the delay, and you have the floor, please.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, good day, everyone. I assume you can see by the slides I have there. And it's my honor to be speaking to you. I'm going to be talking about one of our special projects called the Global Coherence Initiative. And would like to kind of cover why that's important and how that might be important for you in your own lives. To start, I'd like to just share a little bit about our mission at HeartMath, and which has been our mission for the last close to 30 years now. And it's really about helping people connect with that deeper part of themselves, what we call the heart intelligence. And that allows us to bring our physical, mental, and emotional systems into alignment with, our heart's higher wisdom, intuitive guidance. And this really helps us connect with and unfold the path for becoming who we truly are, heart-empowered individuals who really choose to have more care and action and love, which we demonstrate through compassionate care for ourselves, others, and planet Earth. So we do research and have programs for the personal level, which helps people become more self-regulated and aligned with their own inner guidance. It has many benefits, hundreds of papers now published, over 300 papers, independent studies on the benefits of learning how to become more personally coherent. And we have a number of tools and techniques that we've developed called the HeartMath system that help people do that, become more personally coherent. And we also do a lot of work in the social side of things, or what we call social coherence, which is really helping people align in the social domain. So this could be families, workplaces, teams, sports teams, communities, and so on. And as enough people become more socially coherent, that moves us more towards global coherence, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. So the initiative is very much a science-based project. We have a lot of collaborations around the world. This is really all about helping people unite in heart-focused care and intention to really facilitate the shift in global consciousness that I think we could all agree is fairly unstable and incoherent right now, but to help shift that to more stability and balance, cooperation, collaboration, and enduring peace. So there are some high-level hypotheses, I'll call them. The first one is really not a hypothesis. This is very well established, and that is that human and also animals, but our health, our mental functions, our emotions, how we feel throughout a day, and so on, and our behaviors are affected by the background magnetic fields of the planet that we all live in. And so what we're suggesting as a second hypothesis here is that it's really the Earth's magnetic field itself that connects us all. We're all living within that field, and we're suggesting all coupled to it, and that it's carrying and distributing information biologically that between all living systems. So in other words, we're all feeding the field, and we call this the global information field. And if that's true, which I think we have more and more evidence to suggest is in fact true, then when large numbers of people come together like you're doing there, especially when you're in heart-centered states, more caring, loving, compassionate, that feeds the field those waves, and that generates a more coherent field environment that can help benefit others and offset the current stress we have. Just want to give you a little background on how these sun and magnetic fields affect us down here on Earth. And I'm going to show you in my next slide some data from Alexander Chesovsky, who's really the father of this field, and that he was the first to really do this kind of research. And he is a Russian astronomer who was drafted into World War I. And being an astronomer, he was keeping one eye on what the sun was doing, but it occurred to him, it appeared to him that when the sun was, there were a lot of solar flares, which leads to magnetic disturbances here on Earth, that people didn't behave the same. They did more aggressive things and just made poor choices. So this got him intrigued. And after the war, he did an exhaustive study of human history. And so this graph that you see here, the blue line on top, and if we start on the left-hand side of the top blue line, this is going back to 1749. And what the blue line is showing is there's a dot basically for every year up until we go down to the second blue line to 1926 when he first published this work. This is the number of major human events that occurred on planet Earth that year. So these are big things. It could be a revolution, the start of a war, major events that had planetary implications. So you see the kind of the cycle of them through the two graphs, the blue line. But the red line on the bottom is the solar cycle for the same time period. So the solar cycle, this is the activity of the sun, its emissions, radio frequencies and solar flares and so on. And that has about a 10.5 to 11-year cycle. But when I first learned of this, it just floored me. I just couldn't believe how strong the correlations are and how strongly our behaviors here on Earth were being tied to the sun and then also the activity of the Earth, which is influenced by the solar activity. Now, it's true that if we look at this kind of data even longer in history, that the start of war and of major turmoil happens in a very kind of small area around the peaks of these cycles. Chesovsky called this an index of mass human excitability. But I think what's really important to understand is that these aren't energies that are out to get us or anything like that. They're just energy influxes into the planet that then cycle down into us to be able to use. So it's really important here. I want to underline this, that those same periods, of those solar increases are also the periods of the greatest flourishing on Earth. It's when we have the greatest number of inventions, peace initiatives, flourishing in the arts and science also happen during these same times. So it really is about how we are able to use these energetic influxes, as I like to call them, into the Earth system. Now, to do research around this and really understand and validate some of these observations, we have to measure things, of course. So to do this, to really understand the magnetic and energetic field environment of the planet, we have to install what we call very magnetometers. They're ultrasensitive that are designed specifically to measure the magnetic background of what Earth is doing itself. I won't say a lot here. Here's a picture of one site. This is the one here in California in the United States. And the magnetometers themselves are buried underground. And this is what the one looks like here, which is they're kind of isolated. They have to be out in the country, away from cities, so we don't have a lot of man-made magnetic noise interfering with things. And there's two primary things I'll talk about today that are relevant for humanity. So this here we have kind of an idealized picture of what's called the geomagnetic field. And that's really important for life on Earth. It's the shield that protects us from the solar wind and other cosmic influences. So without this geomagnetic field, Earth would be like Mars very quickly. Very low, the water would be blown away and so on. But so this is the field that our compasses tune into. The North Pole and the South Pole, and almost everybody is familiar with. The it's a pure magnetic field that extends out into space many hundreds of thousands of miles. But if you recall back in science class when we were in school, most people got to do the kind of demonstration of where you dump iron filings out on a piece of glass, and you put a magnet under it, and you kind of shake it, and you see how all the little iron filings line up to show you the shape of the field around the magnet. Well, they line up in lines, and that's kind of what we're representing here with these white lines. And those are called field lines or flux lines. And how this is relevant for us humans here on Earth is if you think of these field lines like guitar strings, a tightly stretched string. And of course, when you pluck a string or any stringed instrument, it vibrates and it has a frequency or a note. And that's exactly what's happening with the magnetic field of the Earth. These field lines are being plucked by the solar wind rushing by. Now, this image here is really fascinating. This is brand new data, and this is from satellites. This is not an artistic image. This is actual real data. So the little tiny white dot that you see in these images is Earth. But what we're seeing here is an actual visual picture of the ringing of the magnetic field of the Earth, the actual vibration as it interacts. The reason that this is so important, frequency of these resonant frequencies, and this is called fairly straightforward. Primary resonant frequencies of Earth, of these field line resonances, is 0.1 hertz, a cycle or rhythm every 10 seconds. Now, as it turns out, that is exactly the same frequency as the human coherent heart rhythm. And a coherent heart rhythm is what our hearts beat out. That's the rhythm of our hearts when we are appreciating something or feeling love. Our bodies naturally, our hearts go into this natural coherent rhythm. And we've done a lot to teach people how to shift into this rhythm. But it's just amazing that our coherent rhythm of humans is exactly the same as the resonant frequency of Earth, its primary frequency. Of course, when we have two systems vibrating at the same frequency, like with tuning forks, you can transfer energy and information between those systems. Now, the second type of magnetic waves I wanted to talk about today that's relevant here are called Schumann resonances. Now, these are very different than the field line resonances that I was just talking about. These are much weaker, much smaller in magnetic amplitude, but these are magnetic waves that occur around the planet, and they get trapped between the bottom of the ionosphere, which you could think of as this big soap bubble around the planet, and the Earth itself. So when these magnetic waves get created, if they fit the geometry correctly, they become what are called globally propagating standing waves. And that just means that they're everywhere all the time. And there's 8 of these. A lot of people don't know this. They just know about the first one, which is 7.8 hertz. So these are much faster frequencies than the field line resonances. But there's 8 of them, and they all overlap the same frequencies as human brain waves. So in other words, Earth is vibrating and resonating all the time at the same frequency as our heart and at the same frequency as our brain. And it's really interesting that that's the same way we were. Magnetic fields produced by us, by the human body. The heart is the big wave. It's so we can measure the magnetic field produced by the human heart 3 feet from the body, where you can only measure a brainwave a couple of inches. So it's very interesting how the amplitude of the human are also very similar. Important, I think, in humanity is vibrating at the same frequency, and we can transfer information. And I'm going to just jump forward to some really I think, relevant research here for the topic of today. So this is data from the blue lines that you see here. So our heartbeats change with every pair of heartbeats, are constantly varying. And that's what creates the heart rhythm. So this is from a study where we put recorders on a group of people to record their heart rhythms. It's called heart rate variability, 24 hours a day for over a 30-day period. Now, it's important to understand this group of people that are wearing these recorders, in this case, were spread across the state of California, which, if you're not familiar, is a very big state. So we had people hundreds of miles apart, or many hundreds of kilometers, wearing these devices. And when we time locked their data and averaged it together, that's the blue line. And we didn't expect to see this, but what we found was that their heart rhythms, a very slow wave in their heart rhythms, was actually synchronizing together. And this was just really actually shocking to see this. We did not expect it, because we often talk about how on some level we're really all connected. Well, this was showing that something was connecting this group of people who spread across the state, just going about their normal day. And the only thing that could explain this that we could think of was that if all the people that were part of the study were synchronizing to some field that was across the entire state. And that turns out to be the red line that you see on this graph, which is the power in the resonant frequencies in the magnetic field. So what we saw here was that people were literally synchronizing together because we were all synchronizing to the earth itself. And this is quite profound. I mean, the importance of this is just starting to be understood. Now, when we saw this, we had to replicate it, of course. So we did a much larger study. So we had groups in 5 countries all around the earth. So there was a group in Saudi Arabia, Zealand, one here in California, England, and Lithuania. So we repeated this study. Then this gave us a much larger population to look at. And another interesting finding has emerged, and that is that we had one group, if we pull from these groups all around the earth, that is synchronized together as a group and is what we call positively correlated with the magnetic field data. In other words, when the field goes up, their heart rate variability goes up, and increases and so on, up and down. That's the graph on the right-hand side of the slide. But there was another group that was also synchronized together as a group across the time period, the study period, but were inversely correlated, meaning that they physiologically have the opposite response to the same change in the magnetic field. Now, really importantly, there was a third group. And this is a group who was not synchronized to anything, not other people in the groups or to the earth itself. And that is probably, I'm going to suggest, not the group you want to be in. So there's many, many studies now suggesting that it's very beneficial for us to be in sync with the earth. Kind of also, I would suggest, in sync with humanity, kind of a group consciousness. So that we don't know why some people are in one group or another, but this is brand new research and just starting to get published. Now, another aspect of what I mentioned earlier is how we can affect the field. So when we come together, like in groups, like you are there, especially when we are in an appreciative or loving state, there's actually an amplification that occurs that puts a stronger signal out into the planetary field environment. So this is really creating a feedback system between the Earth's field itself and humanity. So when we come together in groups where we have a lot of positive emotional energy and love and compassion, that actually further amplifies this and puts it out as a bigger signal into the field environment. Now, this is brand new data that I wanted to show you. What we're looking at here, I know this is kind of a complicated looking graph, but this is one of the subgroups, one of the groups of 20 people, the study I was just talking about. It's just kind of complex, but organized are the group members, not only to each other, but to the earth, to the rhythms in the earth over of a day. So on the left side, we see the day before the exercise called a heart lock-in. Now, this is a heart-focused meditation where you really get into that coherence I showed earlier, of that very beautiful sine wave heart rhythm. So they did this exercise, this heart lock-in, really sending love and appreciation to each other for 15 minutes. And the graph on the right shows what happened the next day. Radical shift, where we see the whole group coming into synchronization with each other and with the earth. And it's amazing that this seems to have had an effect that lasted over at least 2 days. So just this one exercise of really getting in touch with our deeper hearts and really radiating love and appreciation to the others in the group had a lot of benefits. It created a measurable synchronization, not only between them, but with the earth itself. That had a 2-day carryover effect. So kind of my bottom line, that to really, all right, it actually starts at coherence, ability for what really feeds the field. To think about is how much am I in appreciation and kindness filled with maybe feelings of frustration, because it all counts. Together and work in groups, coherence, and take that self-responsibility for what we're feeding the field in our social groups, whether in our families, our communities, our workplaces. That amplifies the signal, and that's what we mean by social coherence. And as enough groups around the earth really take on this responsibility and become ambassadors and coherence ambassadors, that will eventually put out a strong enough signal into the planetary field environment that helps others wake up and make the same kind of shift. So that's really the main message I wanted to do in the time I had today, and I hope it makes sense to everyone. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
You didn't record anything.
Thank you very much, Dr. McCraty. It's certainly fascinating. And I wonder if you have some more minutes to perhaps hear comments or questions from the auditory.
And here we have one question. In a group of people who are continuously together, is the radiation greater?
Well, in a group of people, when we come together, it's not that the fields that we're generating from our hearts is stronger. It's more that the energy is really coherent. I didn't have time to show you those kind of graphs and things. So between the individuals, and when you have systems that are resonating at the same frequency, there's a non-linear amplitude. So in reality, we're actually affecting the field more than the sum of the two fields because of the resonance principle.
Tenemos 3 preguntas más acá para
We
el
have
doctor.
3 more questions to ask.
¿Qué sucede cuando el electromagnetismo de la Tierra llega a 12?
What happens when the electromagnetism of the Earth reaches 12?
12.
Well, yeah, okay. I talked about 2 different types of magnetic, very powerful magnetic resonant frequencies. Neither of these are in megahertz. They're very low frequencies. So field line resonances is a very slow frequency. It's like one cycle every 10 seconds. So you can think of this like if you're at the ocean, it's the big waves, the tides that come in that would knock you over if you're not careful. And then riding on top of those waves is smaller, higher frequency waves. Those would be like the Schumann resonances that overlap our same frequencies. Now, there are also other influences that affect us that we also absorb energy from that are actually beneficial. And some of those are high frequencies, but though they're not measured like in numbers like 12, these are measured things like in picotesla. No, but there's also very high frequency radiations from the sun. And this is called solar radio flux, frequency of 2.8 gigahertz. So it's very, very fast frequency. It's similar to the resonant frequency of our DNA. And when that frequency is increased by the sun, we actually feel better. We sleep better, make better decisions, and so on. And what we're also finding is yet another type of influence is what's called cosmic rays. And these are energies that are very high energy and high frequency that come in not from our sun, but probably the center of the galaxy and the cosmos itself. And those also have beneficial effects and seem to be a source of energy. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I hope that is a helpful answer.
Tenemos aquí otra pregunta.
We have one last question.
Actually, 3 questions.
3 more questions.
¿Cualquier criatura viviente vibra, así como los seres humanos?
Does any living organism vibrate just like human beings?
Yes, in their own way. I mean, of course, humans and horses and dogs, things like this that have a beating heart have larger measurable magnetic fields that we can radiate, that we can measure external to the body. But any living system, if you have a sensitive enough device to measure the magnetic field, certainly produces a magnetic field. I mean, even a vibrating atom would do that. So it's when we have collectives of cells coming together, like the heart beating together, all their fields add to make a very large field.
Y todo eso es un conjunto de lo que es la vibración.
Muchas gracias. Tenemos ahora 2 preguntas.
Thank you. We have 2 more questions. The first one, there's a 2-part question. And the first one is, how do our good vibes resonate out in towards the environment? And how do we affect with the type of feeling that we're having? How do we affect the environment?
Okay. Yeah, it's really what I was trying to say. Let me put it this way: is what I'm suggesting here, and what our data is starting to suggest, is that the magnetic fields that we radiate, especially by the heart, especially about our emotional state, connected to and coupled with your field, so that think of, let me use this as an analogy. We almost all have mobile. So quite literally the way a phone works, magnetic field that connects, and that field is carrying the information. It's a photo we take, our voice. So our emotion carried by the field. So it couples with the big field of Earth. Then, so when we take lots and lots, all the field all the time. So it's kind of like you could have 100 conversations going on in the room. Phone words to pick out our conversation, the one we want. Receiver create a resonant link to that. We get the information downloaded. I'm suggesting we work the same way. And so love, care, compassion is a stronger frequency that we can put out into the environment.
Muchas gracias. Tengo aquí ahora sí una última pregunta.
I have one last question. Thank you very much.
Sobre una persona aquí en el auditorio que ha leído que las resonancias Schumann han ido bajando en megahertz, ¿verdad? Desde la década del 70. ¿Esto tal vez ha impactado en el comportamiento del ser humano desde ese momento, desde la década del 70?
A question from one of the audience members is that they read that from the 70s to the year present, the resonance of the human being has decreased slightly. Does this, in some manner, affect?
Are you referring to the Schumann resonances? Yeah, that is not true. There's been a number over the years, and there's been a recent internet thing, and you just cannot believe what you see on the internet a lot of times. So the resonant frequencies of the Schumann resonances in particular are exactly the same as they were when they were first measured in the late 1950s and early 1960s. They do seasonal, but the base frequencies have not changed. And that's really good, because for those frequencies to change, it would mean that the atmosphere relative to the Earth would be changing. And that would not be good for our health and survival. So, it's also been a link trying to equate the frequencies of human resonance with consciousness. And I think that's also a mistake. It's the carrier frequencies don't have to change, but it's the information being carried by them that is changing as we evolve in our own consciousness, which really translates to us putting more love, care, compassion into that field environment, that type of information.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
My pleasure, and I wish you all a very successful conference and